Welcome to OOTO, the Out of the Office Investigation.
Today, Ben, we're heading down to the wind-swept beaches of Bahia de la Ventana in Baja California Sur, Mexico. Now, this is a place that adventurers and kite surfers know as just paradise. But, beneath that beautiful surface, a storm is definitely brewing. We're digging into a community that's really at a crossroads, one that is fighting tooth and nail to hold on to its identity in the face of just explosive, unregulated growth. And this isn't just about tourism. It's about survival. It's about culture and what it even means to be a community.
That's it exactly, Anya. We're going to be looking at how a decades-old, kind of under-the-table economy has finally hit a breaking point, and the really dramatic, you could even say severe measures that the local community and the authorities are now putting in place to get control back. This is an investigation into its past to really understand the high-stakes future that's being built right now. And Anya, this sign right here, this is our first piece of evidence. And it's not your typical Welcome to Paradise brochure, that's for sure. The language is so blunt, it's almost confrontational. Unauthorized workers, high risk to our region. It talks about threats to culture, safety, and the environment. From a psychological perspective, this is a crystal clear signal of a community that's shifting. They're going from this passive, welcoming posture to a really defensive, protective one. It's a boundary being drawn in the sand, literally and figuratively. When a community feels like it has to post a warning like this, it tells you the social contract is broken. The unspoken rules of just mutual respect have been violated so many times that now they have to be spelled out in the harshest possible terms, with threats of fines, exclusion, and even permanent bans.
Exactly, Ben. And to get why that warning is so serious, we really have to rewind and look at the then versus the now. For years, this whole region just thrived on what the source documents call a tolerated staple of an under-the-table, cash-based economy. And this wasn't some flaw in the system. For a long, long time, it was the system, especially for that seasonal wave of adventure sports lovers. Think about it. A foreign kite instructor could just fly in for the winter, teach on the beach for cash, and then fly out. A local family might offer boat trips or sell tacos on the beach without any formal registration. It was all built on convenience and this kind of mutual unspoken agreement to just look the other way. And psychologically, you can see why this informal system worked. It was just convenient for everybody involved. The seasonal instructors got to skip all the bureaucracy, tourists got cheaper lessons, and even homeowners could get services done without any paperwork. It's really a classic case of cognitive dissonance, but on a community-wide scale. Everybody kind of knew it wasn't strictly legal, but the benefits seemed to outweigh the risks. But all that convenience was creating these hidden fractures. Every single unregulated tour puts stress on the marine environment. Every uncertified instructor operating without insurance created a huge public safety liability. And critically, every dollar that was flowing through the shadow economy was a dollar that didn't go into public services through taxes or into the pockets of the local, legally operating Mexican businesses and families who were trying to do it the right way. It was slowly eating away at the very foundation of the community it looked like it was serving. And those fractures, well, they've now become what the briefing documents, authored by community leader and researcher Paul Bulow, call an existential threat. Now, Anya, that's an incredibly powerful choice of words. This isn't just hyperbole. It completely reframes the issue from, a simple economic problem or some minor inconvenience into a fundamental danger to the community's actual survival. The leadership working with all the different levels of government has pretty much declared a zero-tolerance policy. That old, charming, informal way of doing things, it's no longer seen as some cute quirk of a laid-back beach town. It's now viewed as a clear and present danger to their culture, their safety, and the fragile environment that really sustains them all. Okay, so let's break down this existential threat because the community documents are really specific about it. There are three main pillars. First up is the degradation of local culture. And this gets right to the heart of the ejidos. These are the local communal landholders who are the historical stewards of this region. People from communities like Ejido Agua Amarga and Ejido de los Blanes. So when an unpermitted foreign worker offers a panga tour or kitesurfing lesson for cash, they're not just taking a job, they are directly undermining the economic freedom of the very families who've anchored this community for generations. Anya, that is a direct threat to their cultural continuity.
Oh, it absolutely is, Ben. And the second pillar is public safety, which is just a huge psychological piece of the puzzle. Just think about these high-risk sports like kiteboarding or wing foiling. An uncertified, uninsured instructor is a massive liability. If a tourist has a serious accident, who's responsible? There's no insurance, there's no safety net, so the burden falls completely on the local and often strained emergency services. This creates this hidden anxiety within the community, this constant, low-level fear of some catastrophic event that they are not prepared for and that could just ruin their reputation forever. And finally, and this is maybe the most crucial part, is the damage to the environment.
The Cerralvo Channel is this delicate, world-renowned marine ecosystem. The documents are crystal clear that unregulated boat tours are stressing the wildlife, especially the orcas and whales that migrate through. This isn't just an ecological problem, it's an economic one. They are literally destroying the very product that their entire legitimate tourism economy depends on. It is a textbook tragedy of the commons, where the chase for short-term individual gain by these unregulated operators threatens to destroy the shared resource for everyone.
And this risk assessment table just makes the threat so tangible. It's not some abstract idea. The wind sports sector, the very heart of the tourism economy, is rated at critical risk. But what's really fascinating here, Ben, is that little note about cross-referencing of safety logs with immigration status. This shows a level of interagency coordination that we've just never seen before. We're talking about maritime authorities, like the Capitanía de Puerto, sharing data in real time with immigration, the INM. This is the government actively closing loopholes that people used for years to get by. It's a systemic response. It tells us the community's tipping point wasn't just a feeling, it actually triggered a top-to-bottom re-engineering of how they enforce the rules. That gray area people used to operate in, it's systematically being erased.
So this brings us to the now, a whole new reality that's defined by a term we keep seeing over and over in the regulatory briefings: active enforcement. This isn't just about writing a few new laws, it's a complete systemic and cultural overhaul in how those laws are enforced. We're going to walk through the key pillars of this new 2026 framework, and let's start with labor and social order. Anya, this is where the rules get very, very real for anyone who wants to work in La Ventana.
You're listening to OOTO, the Out-of-the-Office Investigation, with research by El Campesina.
Okay, first, let's look at the 90-10 national labor ratio. Now, by federal law, at least 90% of any company's workforce has to be Mexican nationals. For years in seasonal towns like this, that rule was, let's just say, loosely enforced, if it was enforced at all. But now, authorities are actively auditing this using what they call employer registration certificates. So that small, foreign-owned kite school with 4 foreign instructors and only 1 local helper, they are an immediate and blatant violation. From a policy standpoint, this isn't meant to be punitive, it's corrective. It's designed to force businesses to actually invest, train, and hire local talent, which fundamentally shifts the economic benefits of tourism back into the community that's hosting it. Then you've got this mandatory transition to a 40-hour work week, and it's all tracked with electronic logs. Now, on the surface, this is about modernizing labor standards and making sure people get fair pay, but psychologically, this represents a really profound cultural shift. The old vibe was this casual, work when the wind blows kind of culture. That was part of the appeal, right? This new rule slaps a rigid, formal structure onto that whole lifestyle. For small businesses, this adds a huge layer of administrative pressure. They can't just pay cash at the end of the day anymore. Now they have to manage schedules, track hours, and stay legally compliant in a way they never ever had to before. It's a move toward formalization that brings crucial protection for workers, but it also introduces a level of stress and corporate structure that a lot of the original entrepreneurs and adventurers were probably trying to escape in the first place. And it's not just about the hours you work, it's about full legal integration into the Mexican system. All personnel must now be registered with IMSS, that's the National Social Security Institute, and SAT, which is the tax authority. Now, from a public health and a community stability point of view, IMS registration is absolutely critical. The source documents really highlight a key risk. Hiring somebody without IMSS leaves a homeowner or a business owner personally liable for any accidents on the job. So that roofer or gardener who falls off a ladder, that can lead to debilitating lawsuits, even liens on your property. So IMSS isn't just a benefit for the worker, it's a liability shield for the entire community. It makes sure that one workplace injury doesn't spiral into a personal financial catastrophe that just ripples outwards and destabilizes everyone. All right, let's move to the second pillar of this new framework, the Maritime and Environmental Protocol. This is where the community's stewardship role really becomes legally official. The centerpiece of this whole effort is the 2026 Orca Management Plan, or PMT. Now, this is not just a set of friendly suggestions. It's a binding technical directive for the entire Cerralvo Channel. And psychologically, this represents a fundamental rethinking of the marine environment. It's no longer seen as this wide-open, exploitable playground for tourists, but as a fragile, finite resource that requires active, scientific management. This plan is the legal backbone for protecting the region's most valuable and most vulnerable non-human residents. And this slide just brilliantly illustrates the legal teeth behind that plan. For the 2025-2026 season, the authorities, specifically Samarna, the Environmental Ministry, issued only 50 permits for whale and orca sightings. For the entire region, 50. Just think about the hundreds of boats that used to operate here.
This creates an extreme government-enforced scarcity. It immediately changes access to this natural wonder from a chaotic free-for-all into a highly regulated, highly coveted privilege. From an economic view, this makes those legal permits incredibly valuable. And from a compliance view, it makes the law dead simple. If you don't have one of these 50 permits, you are, by definition, operating illegally. The gray area has been completely, totally eliminated. And the key to enforcing that scarcity is technology. The mandatory GPS tracking on every single permitted vessel is an absolute game changer. It lets authorities like Semarnat and even the Mexican Navy, the Marina, monitor every permitted boat's location in real time. From a behavioral psychology perspective, this is a powerful deterrent. It's the whole concept of the digital panopticon. When people know they're being watched, their behavior just fundamentally changes. They are so much more likely to respect exclusion zones, keep a safe distance from wildlife, and follow the rules. It completely removes the chance for plausible deniability. You can't just claim you didn't know you were too close to the whales when your GPS log, which is being monitored by multiple federal agencies, proves that you were. So the new framework is clear and the enforcement is super technologically advanced. The next logical question is, okay, if you're a foreign instructor or a tour operator, how do you get on the right side of these laws? What are the pathways to actually operate legally? Well, the community documents outline two distinct routes, but as we're about to see, Anya, neither path is exactly a walk in the park. The price of admission has gone up a lot.
Right, Ben. The first is the entrepreneurial pathway. This means creating a formal Mexican company, like an SDRL, which is kind of like an LLC. This route gives you a liability shield, so it separates your personal assets from the business. The second is the personal pathway for individuals, like a freelance kite instructor, which requires a resident visa with work rights. But here's the critical change. The barrier to entry for both has been raised dramatically. The sources tell us that as of 2026, government fees for residency have doubled, and the financial solvency requirements, that's the amount of money you have to prove you have in the bank, have increased significantly. This is not just inflation, Ben. This is a deliberate policy strategy to filter out the casual, transient, van life, seasonal worker and professionalize the entire industry. They are actively choosing individuals and businesses who are more invested, more stable, and more likely to contribute long-term to the community.
And what if you choose not to follow these really demanding paths? Well, the consequences are severe, and maybe most controversially, they are enforced through a system that empowers, or some might even say weaponizes, the community itself. Anonymous reporting. The government has launched a portal called SIQAL, which is basically a formal whistleblowing platform. And as the slide shows, residents are encouraged to discreetly gather evidence, photos of boats, videos of transactions, license plates, and submit them directly to the authorities. You're listening to OOTO, the out-of-the-office investigation, with research by El Campesino. And Ben, this step right here is where the social fabric of the community really comes under pressure. We'll explore that more in a minute, but it really shifts the dynamic from neighbors to potential informants. Exactly, Anya. And that leads us to this slide, which has what is probably the single most powerful enforcement tool in this entire framework. The consequences are not just local. This quote reveals the ultimate penalty. The data from that registry of identified offenders and the documents specify this includes high-resolution photos and verified international addresses is shared with consulates and federal migration authorities to flag passports. Just let that sink in. A violation for illegally teaching a kitesurfing lesson in a small fishing village in Baja can get you banned from entering the entire country of Mexico, and quite possibly for life. The stakes have been raised from a simple fine or a slap on the wrist to a permanent, unappealable international consequence. It's an unbelievably powerful deterrent. And this entire framework ban, with its intense enforcement and these severe penalties, is really about more than just legal paperwork or paying your taxes. It's a profound statement about community identity, about sovereignty and stewardship. At its very heart, it's a fight against what some locals call gringofication. Psychologically, that term represents a really deep-seated fear of cultural erasure. That process where an outside, often more economically powerful culture just overwrites and displaces the local one. It's the fear that the language, the customs, the economic control, and the very soul of your home is going to be supplanted by something foreign. This new framework is the community actively and legally pushing back against that process. This quote from the strategic guide is just absolutely fascinating from a psychological point of view because it shows how deep this resistance goes. The simple act of using the correct historical name for the bay, Ensenada de Muertos, instead of a defunct foreign developer name, Bahia de los Sueños, it acts as a social and cultural litmus test. I mean, using the historical name signals respect. It signals that you've done your homework and that you acknowledge the authority of the local Ejido landholders, who are the rightful stewards of that land. It's a small linguistic detail that reveals a massive amount about your worldview. Do you see yourself as a guest who's integrating into their community, or as an outsider who's imposing your own narrative? For inspectors, it's a huge red flag that you probably don't know or maybe don't care about any of the other more important rules either. So we arrive at the central and probably the most difficult question of this whole investigation. All of this control, all this surveillance, all these high-stakes rules, what is the long-term outcome for the community itself? On one hand, you can really see this as a courageous and necessary blueprint for preserving a community's soul and its natural resources in the face of just overwhelming tourism pressure. From a public safety and an economic health perspective, you can make a strong argument for yes. This model makes sure that everyone who profits from the community also contributes to it through taxes and social security. It enforces professional safety standards that protect both tourists and locals in high-risk activities, and it legally protects the fragile marine ecosystem that the entire economy depends on for its long-term survival. In many ways, this is a model of preservation through law. It's a potential blueprint for how other small communities can deal with the pressures of over-tourism and hypergrowth, choosing a path of sustainable, managed, slow growth over a short-term, destructive boom.
But from a psychological and a social health standpoint, Ben, it is so much more complicated and honestly a lot more dangerous. A system that relies so heavily on anonymous whistleblowing and a permanent registry of offenders can be incredibly corrosive to the social fabric. Does it trade the external threat of unregulated growth for the internal threat of a community that's constantly watching and reporting on itself? I mean, this can foster deep-seated paranoia, suspicion, and resentment. It can turn neighbors against each other. It really begs the question, can you truly save the soul of a community by putting in a system of surveillance that might fundamentally erode the trust and goodwill among its members? That is the incredibly fine psychological tightrope they are walking right now.
Ultimately, the documents we've gone through are just unequivocal on this point. The community leadership believes this level of control is the necessary price of admission. Their stated goal is to ensure that the beauty and, more importantly, the economic and cultural benefits of the region stay with the generations of Mexican families who steward it. They're drawing a hard line in the sand and saying that if you want to be a part of this paradise, you have to contribute to its legal, social, and environmental fabric. It's a powerful, and some would say necessary, declaration of self-determination. But it leaves us and them with the ultimate question, and it's one that communities from Bali to Barcelona to Jackson Hole are all facing in their own ways. What is the true price of preserving paradise? It's clearly more than just money or paperwork. Is the price a loss of that casual, spontaneous, free-spirited vibe that drew so many people there in the first place? Or is that a necessary and maybe even a small price to pay to protect a culture from being erased by commercialism? What part of a community's soul is lost? And what part is perhaps gained in making that choice? That is the question at the heart of this crossroads, and it's one we'll definitely continue to watch.
And that concludes this Out of the Office investigation. Thank you for listening.